spake unto Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel that they bring unto thee pure oil olive, beaten for the light, to cause the lamps to burn continually in the tabernacle of the congregation. And it shall be a statute forever in your generation.
The Eternal Light. The National Broadcasting Company and its affiliated independent stations bring you The Eternal Light. This public service program is presented under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. Our story today is Morton Wishengrad's adaptation of the Book of Ruth and marks the approaching festival of Pentecost. Featured as Ruth is Charlotte Holland. Alexander Scorby is the narrator. Following the dramatic portion of the program, you will hear a talk by Dr. Louis M. Levitsky.
Now it came to pass, in the days when the judges judged, that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion. And they came into the country of Moab, and continued there. And Elimelech died, and Naomi was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. And Mahlon and Chilion died, both of them. And the woman was left of her 2 children and of her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law out of the place where she was, to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law,
Orpah, Ruth, do not go any further with me.
No, Naomi. Ruth and I will go on.
My daughters, listen to me.
Yes, Naomi.
Return. Go no further.
Naomi, does your God have pleasure in loneliness?
Orpah, you will not be lonely. Go back to your mother's house. The Lord will deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead. And with me.
To go with you, Naomi. There's no rest, no place for us in Moab now that the husbands of our choice are dead.
Orpah, the Lord will grant you rest. Ruth, speak to your sister-in-law.
My cheek is smitten. How can I speak?
The land of Moab is the land of your people.
No longer, Naomi. We will return with thee unto thy people. Say so, my sister Orpah.
Yes, Naomi.
Why will ye go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they might be your husbands? I am too old to have a husband. Should I even have a husband tonight and bear sons, would ye tarry for them till they were grown?
Naomi, in the abundance of your kindness, can you not find one small place for me?
Orpah, my daughter, would you shut yourself off and have no husband? I am grieved for your sake. But turn back, my daughters, for the hand of the Lord is gone forth against me.
And they stood there in the road and lifted up their voices and wept. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and returned to Moab. But Ruth cleaved unto Naomi and would not go. And Naomi was sorely troubled and spoke unto Ruth.
Do not weep, my daughter.
I have lost my husband. Shall I now lose my husband's mother?
You will find a new husband.
Will I find a new husband's mother like Naomi?
Ruth, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her God.
They are no more my people and no more my God.
I must go to Bethlehem in Judah, and you must go back to Moab. Peace be with you, my daughter.
Entreat me not to leave thee and to return from following after thee.
But I must go.
Then whither thou goest, I will go. And where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. And where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me.
When Naomi saw that Ruth was steadfastly minded to go with her, she left off speaking unto her. So they went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem in Judah, that all the city was astir concerning them. And the women said,
Peace be with you.
And with you, peace.
Is this Naomi?
Call me not Naomi.
But I remember it is your name.
Henceforth, call me Mara. Yes, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home empty.
Grieve no more, Naomi. This is a land that was formerly with famine, but now there is increase of corn. Do not grieve. You will see that it is good.
So Naomi returned, and Ruth her daughter-in-law, who came out of Moab. And they found that it was good in Bethlehem, for they came in the beginning of barley harvest. Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of valor of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth said unto Naomi,
Let me now go to the field and glean among the ears of corn.
And Naomi said unto Ruth,
Go, my daughter.
And she went, and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And her hap was to light on the portion belonging unto Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and said unto the reapers,
The Lord be with you. The Lord bless you. Lord bless you.
Then said Boaz unto his servant that was set over the reapers,
Whose damsel is this, that one yonder? It is unknown to me.
It is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi.
I see.
She said, Let me glean, I pray you, and gather after the reapers. She's called Ruth. I thought it would do no injury to allow it.
You're right. I will speak with her.
Swing your sides. There's much to be done.
Peace be with you, Ruth. I am called Boaz.
Yes, my lord.
Hear me, Ruth. Do not go to glean in any other field. Abide here fast by my maidens. No one will molest you here.
I thank you, Boaz.
When thou art athirst, go unto the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn.
Then Ruth fell on her face and bowed down to the ground, and said unto him,
Why have I found favor in thy sight that thou shouldst take cognizance of me, seeing that I am a foreigner?
And Boaz answered and said unto her,
It hath fully been told me all thou hast done to thy mother-in-law, how thou hast left thy father and thy mother in the land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people that thou knewest not heretofore. The Lord recompense thy work, and be thy reward complete from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to take refuge.
Boaz, I who was cast down am raised up. Though I be not as one of thy handmaidens, thou hast comforted me and spoken to the heart of thy handmaid.
And she found favor in the eyes of Boaz. And he said unto her at mealtime,
Come hither and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar.
And she sat beside the reapers, and they reached her parched corn, and she did eat and was satisfied, and left thereof. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying,
Let her glean even among the sheaves, and put her not to shame.
As you command, my lord.
One thing further.
Yes?
Also pull out some for her of purpose from the bundles. Leave it on the ground, and let her glean, and rebuke her not.
So she gleaned in the field until even. And she beat out that which she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. And Naomi saw, and said to Ruth,
Where hast thou gleaned today? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee.
The man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz.
Blessed be he of the Lord who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead.
Then he is known to you?
The man is nigh of kin unto us, one of our near kinsmen.
Yea. He said unto me, Thou shalt keep fast by my young men until they have ended my harvest.
It is good, my daughter, that thou go out with his maidens, and that thou be not met in any other field.
So Ruth kept fast by the maidens of Boaz, to glean unto the end of barley harvest and of wheat harvest. And she dwelt with her mother-in-law. And Naomi her mother-in-law said unto her,
My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well for thee?
My mother, I do not understand.
Is it not written that if brethren dwell together, and one of them die and have no child, that the husband's brother shall take her to wife and perform the duties of a husband's brother unto her?
But my husband's brother died, and there is no kinsman to obey the law.
Is not so as our kinsman?
Yes, Boaz is our kinsman.
Raise your eyes, Ruth, and regard me. Here is water. Wash thyself. Anoint thee. Put thy raiment upon thee.
But my mother...
Put on thy raiment, my daughter. Tonight there is the winnowing of the barley in the threshing floor. You will go there.
You are good, Naomi, my mother. In the morning will I order my prayers for thee. In the noonday I will bring thee my gleanings, and in
the even which is now, there is water for the washing, and clean raiment to put on. The crimson is in your face, my daughter.
My mother is pleased to death.
Attend me, Ruth. Get thee down to the threshing floor. But make not thyself known to the man until he shall have done eating and drinking.
I will do what you wish.
When he lieth down, mark the place where he shall lie, and thou shalt go in and uncover his feet, and lay thee down.
But, Naomi,
I do not question. You will see, my daughter. He will tell thee what thou shalt do.
All that thou sayest unto me, I will do.
And Ruth went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that Naomi bade her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself. And behold, a woman lay at his feet. And Boaz said,
Who art thou?
I am Ruth, thy handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman.
Blessed be thou of the Lord, Ruth, my kinswoman. Thou hast shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning.
I have done as Naomi ordered me.
Do not fear, for all the men in the gate of my people do know that thou art a virtuous woman.
Again, Boaz.
I am a near kinsman, yet...
Have I offended?
No, Ruth. You could not offend. There is a kinsman nearer than I.
Oh.
Hurry this night. In the morning I shall speak with him.
You must?
Is it not the law? If he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman...
Yes, Boaz.
Well, then he must do a kinsman's part. But if he be not willing to do the part of a kinsman to thee...
Yes, Boaz.
Then I will, Ruth.
I thank thee, Boaz.
Lie down and sleep. We shall see in the morning.
And she lay at his feet until the morning. And she rose up before one could discern another. For he said, Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he took her up and said to her,
Ruth.
Yes, my kinsman.
Bring the mantle that is upon thee.
Yes, Boaz.
Hold it. Spread it wide.
And she held her mantle before him, and he measured 6 measures of barley. And when she came to her mother-in-law, Naomi said,
Who art thou, my daughter?
Ruth still, my mother, but also the kinswoman of Boaz. He said, Go not empty to thy mother-in-law, and these 6 measures of barley did he give to me.
You have done well, my daughter.
Oh, no, Naomi, it is not well. There is a nearer kinsman. What if he should... Naomi,
Sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall.
but I cannot rest.
Neither will Boaz rest until he has finished the thing this day. Be patient, Ruth. You will see.
Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat him down there. And behold, the near kinsman of whom Boaz spoke came by. And Boaz said to him,
Peace be with you.
And with you, peace, Boaz. It is a good day.
Will you sit here with me? There's a matter of some discussion between us.
And the near kinsman turned aside and sat beside Boaz. And Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said,
Elders, sit ye down here.
And they sat down. And Boaz said unto the near kinsman,
Naomi, that is come back out of the country of Moab, selleth the parcel of land which was our brother Elimelech's.
I am listening, Boaz.
You are his near kinsman,
I am.
and you know the law.
I do.
Well,
Yes, Boaz?
I thought to disclose it unto you.
Which is only proper.
So I thought.
You were saying, Boaz?
Then put it before them that sit here and before the elders of my people.
It is a thing to be considered. Now, it is written in the law and confirmed, no doubt, by the judges and these wise elders.
Yes, I know the law, my kinsman. But what will you do?
Oh, patience, Boaz. As I began to say, it is written in the law and confirmed...
If thou wilt redeem it, and have done.
But, Boaz, my brother...
Kinsman, let thy yea be yea and thy nay be nay. If it will not be redeemed, then tell me that I may know.
I understand. If I do not redeem it...
Then I will, for I am after thee.
Seems there is a great heat over a simple parcel of land.
Kinsman, your answer.
Very well, Boaz. I will redeem it.
Oh.
Now, if the elders will permit, there are things for my attendance.
Kinsman, wait.
Yes, Boaz? Is there more?
What day thou buyest the field of the hand of Naomi,
Yes, Boaz?
thou must also buy Ruth, the woman of Moab, she that was the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Both must be redeemed.
Then I cannot do it.
You cannot?
No, Boaz, I would mar mine own inheritance. Take thou my right of redemption on thee, for I cannot redeem it.
That is your wish, kinsman?
That is my wish, Boaz.
Then peace be with you, kinsman.
And with you peace, Boaz, and pleasure in your redemption.
Now, this was the custom in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning exchanging, to confirm all things. A man drew off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, and this was the attestation in Israel. So the near kinsman said unto Boaz,
Buy it for thyself.
And so saying, he drew off his shoe. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people,
Ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I acquired to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off among his brethren and from the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day.
We are witnesses.
The Lord make the woman that is come into thy house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel.
And do thou worthily in Ephrath, and be famous in Bethlehem.
And let thy house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee of this woman.
So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went in unto her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And the women said unto Naomi,
Blessed be the Lord who hath left thee this day with a kinsman, and let his name be famous in Israel.
And he shall be unto thee a restorer of life, and a nourisher of thine old age.
Yea, for thy daughter-in-law, who is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him.
And Naomi took the child, and laid it in her bosom, and became nurse unto it. And the women her neighbors gave it a name, saying,
There is a son born to Naomi.
And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Amminadab, and Amminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salmon, and Salmon begot Boaz. And Boaz begot Obed, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David.
Copies of the script you have just heard may be obtained free of cost by writing to the Eternal Light, 3080 Broadway, New York 27, New York. And now we present a brief talk by Dr. Louis M. Levitsky, past president of the Rabbinical Assembly of America and rabbi of the Congregation Oheb Shalom of Newark, New Jersey. Dr. Levitsky.
This is the day which the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad on it. By proclamation of the President of the United States, this day is one of thanksgiving for God's grace to us and for the victory granted to our armed forces in Europe. We have wrung at a high price unconditional surrender from the enemies of God and of civilized mankind. God has chosen us, the United Nations, to be His instruments to remove from the face of the earth the blight that almost devoured all that mankind had built up in truth and in mercy in all these many centuries. This day, then, is a day of triumph, not for us, but for the immutable and eternal moral code of all mankind. This code, according to biblical tradition, was proclaimed to all the world at Mount Sinai. The approaching festival of Shavuot, which occasions this morning's program, commemorates that greatest of all historic events. Once again, mankind has learned by sad experience that the moral law cannot be violated with impunity. When the wicked spring up as the grass, and all the workers of iniquity flourish, it is that they may be destroyed forever. It is well to remember on this day of triumph that it is not only, nor primarily, the greater force of our numbers and arms that brought the victory in Europe, but the power of righteousness on whose side we lined up our legions, our ships, and our planes. We, the United Nations, merely carried out God's verdict, decreed by Him at Sinai, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." "Thou shalt not kill, and thou shalt not covet," apply no less to nations than they do to individuals. Consequently, national righteousness must be as much a reality as is personal integrity. The sanction for this universal moral law does not stem from a fleeting economic theory or a temporary political philosophy or a casual social speculation. It is derived from God, and like its author, it is coextensive with time and space. "Thou shalt not take my name in vain" is part of creation itself. No man and no state may use God's name in vain. This moral law is not the property of one people or the possession of one nation. It is the very soul of the universe. A nation, like an individual, which is not attuned to this universal soul, must die. This explains our victory in Europe. Our task is not done. We must needs pray that God lead us to final and complete victory over the remaining forces of arrogance, who would substitute the rule of man or of a state for the rule of God. May God's kingdom of righteousness, justice, and peace for all men soon be established in the world which He created according to His will.
Thank you, Dr. Levitsky. The Eternal Light is written by Morton Wishengrad. The music is composed by Henry Brandt and conducted by Milton Catums. Cantor David Putterman of the Park Avenue Synagogue, New York, was the soloist. Charlotte Holland was featured as Ruth. Boaz was played by Louis Van Ruten. Naomi by Nell Burt. And Alexander Scorby was the narrator. The entire production was under the direction of Ira Avery. This program was a public service of the National Broadcasting Company and its affiliated independent stations, and was presented under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. If you would like to have a free copy of the script, write to the Eternal Light, 3080 Broadway, New York 27, New York. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
A service of KIBMradio.com, the Internet's home for an all old-time radio.
spake unto Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel that they bring unto thee pure oil olive, beaten for the light, to cause the lamps to burn continually in the tabernacle of the congregation. And it shall be a statute forever in your generation.
The Eternal Light. The National Broadcasting Company and its affiliated independent stations make free time available to present The Eternal Light. This program comes to you under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. Our play today by Irving Feynman is based on the biblical book of Ruth and is entitled Boaz Makes Up His Mind. We present it in observance of the Jewish festival of Shavuot. Featured in the cast are Alexander Scobie as Boaz and Bryna Rayburn as Ruth.
Come on there with the barley. The threshers are waiting. It's time to quit, Boaz. The sun is setting fast. Shall I let the men go?
No, Eli. Let them eat and sleep here on the threshing floor. It'll be a fine night with a full moon. We can get started at dawn and finish the threshing tomorrow.
Good, Boaz. I'll tell them.
One moment. The gleaners have not finished gathering the fallen grain. Let them continue a while if they wish. And that young woman from Moab.
Naomi's Ruth?
Yes, Ruth. See that she gets plenty to glean. And see that the men do not molest her.
You told me that yesterday and the day before, Boaz. You've got that woman on your mind. Yeah?
No, Eli. It's only that she's younger and gentler than the women who come to glean. And Naomi's husband, Elimelech, was one of my kin.
Ruth is young enough, but she looked as if she could not be easily molested. The women of Moab...
Tell the men to stop work, Eli. We'll have corn and roast lamb for supper and plenty of wine.
Yes, Boaz. Time to quit, men. We'll eat and sleep tonight on the threshing floor.
She is on your mind. You cannot deny she's been a good deal in your thoughts since she first appeared gleaning in your field. You cannot deny that you were stirred at first sight of Ruth. She's so different, this woman of Moab, from the women you've known, the women of Bethlehem. Look at her there in the field. A magnificent creature. Handsome, sturdy, and self-possessed. Yet gentle and sweet. And when you learned who she was and heard the tale of her loyalty to Naomi, how after the death of Elimelech and his sons, Naomi left Moab to return to Bethlehem, and Ruth said to Naomi,
Entreat me not to leave thee, and to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest, will I die, and there I will be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me.
Yes, you were very much taken with her, weren't you? Even her way of speaking enchanted you. You began to take a kindly interest in her welfare and protecting her from the lusty young men who work in your fields. Other women glean in your field, poor wretches. Yes, but Ruth is the widow of Mahlon, son of Elimelech, and a princess in her own land. And how beautiful to behold in the field, bending to gather the grain. But she's a strange woman from an enemy country, and you'd best forget her.
The fire is good, and the lamb was well roasted. A good way to end the day.
Yes, yes. The men have done a good day's work. We have as fine a harvest as any in Judah.
And there's much to be done tomorrow. We'd better be going to sleep.
Oh, a while longer, Eli. This is a magic night.
You're right, Boaz. A night for making merry. Pass me that wineskin, brother.
Let every man drink until his eyes shall be red with wine. Ah, here, Boaz.
Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who created the fruit of the vine.
How about you, Elias? Will you drink with us?
Like a city broken down and without a wall, so is he whose spirit is without restraint.
A strong man wants no restraint. Nor have we any need of walled cities. Did we not beat those Jebusites back behind the great walls of their city when they tried to steal our crops? I'll be a son of Belial if we won't drive them altogether from their stronghold. I'll take it tomorrow if you come with me, Boaz.
Cease your drunken boasting, Gibor. Surrounded as we are by enemies, we shall not be safe here unless we rout out the strangers who come to sojourn among us and they spy out our land.
Elias is thinking about that Moabite woman, Boaz. All women frighten Elias. Drink some of that wine, Elias, and you won't be afraid of women. Isn't that so, men?
Wine is a mocker. Strong drink, a brawler, and whosoever gets reeling drunk is a fool.
Listen to it.
You laugh like idiots. What I say is true. We shall not be safe until we rout out the spies among us.
True it is, Elias, that we are surrounded by dangerous enemies who send in their treacherous spies among us. But Moses said, "Love ye the stranger, for we were strangers in the land of Egypt." And Moses said, "A stranger shalt thou not wrong, neither shalt thou oppress him."
We shall have to rise up before dawn to finish the threshing. Are you not ready for sleep, Boaz?
No, the night is fine, the moon shining like silver so high in the sky, and the stars swinging low like lamps in the warm wind. I shall sit up yet a while, Elias.
Time to sleep, men. Let's rise before dawn.
Elias has too much of the self-denying spirit. And you too, Boaz. There you sit not drinking when you could be as drunk as I am. There you are without a wife when you could marry any woman in Bethlehem. Though I must say it's a fine free life you live here in your fields. Drink, Boaz, and pass me the skin.
Yes, indeed, I cherish my freedom to do whatever I wish as I shall tonight, sleeping there by that great heap of grain under the sky. And yet, the Lord God himself said to Adam, "It is not good for man to be alone." And he gave him Eve. But when I do take a woman to wife, it will not be one whose rich father sells her to me like a slave. Oh, nor will I be tricked into marriage. I shall marry only a woman of my own choosing, as Jacob took Rachel, because he loved her. Huh? What's that? Who's there?
It is I.
Who?
I am Ruth. Naomi's Ruth.
Ah, Ruth. But what are you doing there at my feet?
I have covered myself with thy cloak, Boaz. Thou hast been kind to me.
But I do not want you at my feet. Get up, Ruth, so that I may see you and know you're not but a dream.
Yes, Boaz.
Come here to me. I've looked at you often from afar, Ruth, and found you very beautiful. And now it is a wonderful, unspeakable delight to have you near me in the moonlight.
Nor can I speak, Boaz, of my delight to be here. When I left Moab with Naomi, I knew only that I could not be happy there, because my spirit had been weaned from the evil ways of Moab and was forever married to the spirit of Naomi's people, of thy people.
And are you happy among us?
It is not always pleasant to be an alien, Boaz, a stranger in a strange land, to be looked upon with suspicion by the women and with wantonness by the men who have heard of the abominable rites before Baal. But in thy field I have found kindness, and now that I have come to thee, I know that only with thee can I have the fullness of happiness.
But you should not have come here in the night. What if you're seen? You know what will be said of you by the men here and by the women in Bethlehem. They will speak of the shamelessness of the women of Moab.
Let them speak, for thou art good, Boaz. and strong, and thou wilt protect me from all evil.
But how do you know I will protect you?
Because thou hast done so already. And dost thou know why, Boaz?
I have wondered.
Because thou lovest me, Boaz. And that is why I have not feared to come to thee in the night, to remind thee that thou art our near kinsman, Naomi's, and therefore mine, and that it is thy right to redeem the land of Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, and to raise up again the name of the dead on his inheritance. Is it unseemly to thee that I should tell thee of thy right to marry me, Boaz?
No, Ruth. I love your courage. But there is another man who is a closer kinsman than I. It is told the merchant in Bethlehem was the first right of redemption.
But him I do not love, Boaz.
Come near to me, Ruth. You're very beautiful. And it is a wonderful delight to breathe your fragrance with the fragrance of harvest night. But you must go now, for you must not be seen here. In the morning I shall go to Bethlehem and speak to Tob about the redemption. Here, take some of this grain in your cloak for Naomi. And go quickly now.
Until tomorrow, boy.
How like a dream. As if in a dream she came out of the darkness into the soft moonlight. What ineffable joy and pride in her love and faith have come to you, uncalled, like a gift from the opulent night. And now how enchanting it is to watch her descend the hill through the pasture, her shapely hips swinging so gracefully, her sturdy shoulders bowed under the burden of your gift, her lovely form merging with the shadows of the trees by the roadside. How like a dream.
Wake up, man! Up, everyone! Wake up, please! I had a strange dream. Did you sleep well, boys?
Yes, no.
Well, it'll be a fine day for fishing.
I could have sworn I saw a beautiful young woman walking in the moonlight. She must have been gleaning because she was carrying a bundle.
Well, did you go after her?
By the time I had bestirred myself, she was gone.
Just a dream.
But I would have sworn...
Something troubling you, boy?
No, get the men started. I have to ride up to Bethlehem.
Won't you eat first?
No, I cannot eat now. I must go right away. Get them started.
Off to the threshing, men! Wait a moment, Boaz.
Yes?
I saw the woman, too.
Well?
It is because of her that you're troubled. That you're going to Bethlehem.
Yes. It is because of her.
She has bewitched you.
Yes, she has bewitched me.
Listen, Boaz. Yesterday, after a fine day's work, you ate with gusto and drank heartily. You made merry with your men, boasting of your liberty, and lay down to rest satisfied, without a care. As carefree as the youngest of us. There you are, overnight, in a fair way to lose this precious freedom.
I'm merely going to Bethlehem to see Tob the merchant, who is her nearest kinsman. He
Do
will
not go, Boaz. Why go up to Bethlehem? For years you escaped the scheming men and women of Bethlehem, eluded their wiles, continued to live this free, robust life in your broad fields among your men. And now, in the middle of the harvest, you've been captured like Samson by the strange woman. Admit that you were taken by surprise.
Yes, I was startled, Eli. Aroused in the night to find her at my feet. That strange, courageous woman with her sturdy bearing and the soft darkness of her undaunted eyes. She followed the prompting of her heart. In her straightforward manner, she came to me without evasion. I'm Ruth, she said softly in the night, and swept me off my feet. Yes, Eli, I was carried away, captured.
Then forget all about it. Do not go up to Bethlehem.
But I've given my word. I must go. Bewitched and captured. And why did she not come to you in the day, but in the night after you'd eaten and drunk and made merry? And who told her that you were her near kinsman? That was Naomi's doing. Have you resisted the women of Bethlehem only to fall a victim to the bold proposal of this woman of Moab? Belial take it? Anyway, nothing is settled yet.
You've still to see Tobe. That beady-eyed merchant is a shrewd, avaricious bargainer, just showing interest in the worthless, long-neglected property of Elimelech, and Tobe will surely hold out for a profit on his right to redeem it. And that will let you out. That is, of course, if you really want to get out of it. Remember her upturned face in the moonlight, the sweet warmth of her lips, the graceful swing of her hips as she walked, her glimmering feet in the grass. But an alien woman, what do you know of her strange ways and desires disturbing your life, your freedom? Well, she did say to Naomi, thy people shall be my people, my God, my God. Who can believe anything a woman says? Only yesterday your mind was at peace, and now... I'll take it. You've given your word. You said you would go and see Tobe.
It appears that love, my dear Boaz, is not only blind, but deaf.
I'm not interested in your proverbs, Tobe. All I want to know is whether you are interested in redeeming the property of Elimelech.
I'm very much interested in redeeming that property, Boaz, very much indeed. In fact, I had practically decided to redeem it before you came to me. Unless, of course, you would consider paying a good price for my right, huh? I see you don't want to pay for it. I wonder if you want it at all, Boaz. I thought you wanted it because the hand of Elimelech's daughter-in-law went with it, but perhaps you're not sure you want the Moabite woman. Do you or don't you?
What is that to you?
Only that if you surely wanted her, I would make you pay. But as it is, I've decided to forego my right. I don't want her. She's no bargain for me, Boaz.
And what do you mean by that?
As I was saying before, Boaz, when you so rudely stopped me, love is not only blind, but deaf, or you know. Every man to his taste, of course, but she's not to mine.
And what, may I ask, do you find wrong with her?
She's too independent. Woman's place, my dear Boaz, is in the home.
Oh.
We have too much extolled those strong-minded matriarchs like Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel. It sets a bad example. I'd not want my daughter Reba to behave that way. This young woman's got herself talked about in Bethlehem with her independence, boldly running about doing a peasant's work. Immodesty, some people call it. And I may as well tell you that people have been saying worse things. Only this morning I heard that late last night she'd been seen going... Now, don't look at me that way, Boaz. I mean no offense, only telling you what's being said.
All right, then tell me. Sit down and tell me. I want to know all about her.
You should, of course, if you're thinking of marrying her. Now, what I've said may all be woman's gossip. But aside from that, I must say I don't see how you can look with pleasure on the prospect of having Naomi as your mother-in-law. I'm not saying she's not a noble old woman. It's a hard time and all that, but she's much too crafty. Of course, she cannot be blamed for wanting a good home, and when a man's in love, he doesn't mind so much being taken in. But really, Boaz, the way she set out to get a good match for her outlandish daughter-in-law, egging her on, everybody's been talking about it. It may be a mere accident, my dear Boaz, that the Moabites came to glean in your fields, but there are people in town, I must tell you, who think differently. Of course, I would not go so far as to say, as some do, that Naomi induced her to come to Bethlehem for the sole purpose of getting a man.
I'll break every bone.
But Boaz, you said you wanted to know.
You may keep the rest of your slanders for mean-minded men like yourself. Weak, despicable creatures afraid of strong women. But suppose he's telling the truth. Hooked. That's what you've been, hooked. You suspected it all along, and that's what's been troubling you. You're no better than the rest. Scheming women. Setting their traps like Delilah, first to catch a man's eye in his heart and then destroying his freedom. Scheming all the time. What of last night? Naomi preparing Ruth, instructing her.
Wait, my daughter, until he has eaten and drunk, and his heart is merry. And
that damnable Tobe was right. You've been blind and deaf. But do not let yourself be taken in. Go to those women now and charge them openly. They will not dare deny it. Think of the peace of mind you had yesterday. And now this gnawing suspicion. Oh, Lord God of Israel, grant me that peace again.
Watch the bread carefully, Ruth. A man likes good bread. Dead. 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 Did you do as I told you?
I did just as he told me, Naomi. He said he would speak to Pope today.
Be assured, my daughter, he will not rest until he has settled the matter. Oh, but see who is here. Boaz, just at this moment I had you in mind. Come in.
The door was open, Naomi. I heard what you said.
The worst men say that even a husband should knock when he is not expected.
You were right, Naomi. I have not rested. And now I want rest and peace from the tormenting business of this day. I've come to tell you
Sit down, Boaz. You look tired. Ruth is baking bread for the Sabbath. She made fine flour of the grain you gave her. The bread smells good, does it not? Ruth, Boaz is here. Come and talk to him. I knew you would come, Boaz.
Naomi, I came to say that
Sit
you
down,
and Ruth...
Boaz, and wait for her.
That I know you've planned this.
Having been the wife of one and the mother of two men, I know well the proud nature of men.
I know that I've been bewitched into
Since
giving
the
up...
time of our mother Eve, men have blamed women for giving them what they most wanted. Look at me, Boaz.
Her face is lined with furrows worn like tracks in an ancient road, as if ridden by recurring sorrows. In her patient old eyes there is little of craft, but much of wisdom, of the needs of a man and of the perversity of his proud nature.
I will draw you a cup of wine, Boaz. Are you coming, Ruth?
In a moment.
She has learned the songs of the women of Israel. Here, Boaz. Drink. Rest.
Women know very well what will soften a man's heart. Wine and a song. But this patient woman who was a good mother to her son and a faithful wife to Elimelech, who went bravely with her men to a strange land in their adversity and suffered there, does she not deserve a resting place in her old age?
Here is Ruth.
Yes. Here is Ruth, silent, expectant, wiping her brown hands on her apron. Ruth with her brave, undaunted look, her sweet lips, her firm body, sturdy and straight as a cypress. Where is her like in all of Judah? The spell of her eyes, dark and soft as the autumn night, is again upon you. Belial, take it. Why have you resisted? She's a mate for a prince. Give me your hand, Ruth. Joy and great peace have enfolded me like a cloak. I've made up my mind.
I love thee too, Boaz. She is better to me than 7 sons.
She is worthy to be the mother of kings.
So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And she bare a son. And Naomi took the child and became nurse unto it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David.
Now we present a brief talk by the Reverend Dr. Louis C. Gerstein, Associate Rabbi of the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue.
I wonder whether in listening to the broadcast today, you found in the story the same striking idea as I did. Here in this tale, Jewish tradition, significantly, has chosen for its heroine not a Jewess, but a woman of a different people, Ruth, the woman of Moab. This fact is stated in the story quite casually, without any moralizing or preaching. But here is the great truth it emphasizes. When it comes to judging a person, it is not the birth or ancestry, the creed or color that is all important. What really counts is the character of that person, what he is and what he does, what he thinks and how he acts, and how he is able to work with others. These are the all-important questions to consider in judging a person. Judaism has always been concerned with questions such as these. Does the person evidence a love and respect for all human beings? Is he self-centered, or does he feel keenly the plight of his fellow man? Does he think only of himself, or is he ready to cooperate with others? In a word, does he live among men with a high dignity befitting a human being? These are among the questions which must be answered in evaluating a man or woman, whether from Moab or from Mars. Are these not also among the crucial questions in America today? America has never put a premium alone on whence a man comes. America is more interested in where he stands and whither he is going. True Americans are less interested in the color of a man's skin than in the character of his work. True Americans are less interested in what creed a man is born into than in the convictions by which he lives. Here is the forthright challenge all of us must face. Do we live as true Americans? May we ever be stirred by this challenging idea found embodied in the Jewish tradition and found in all true religious teaching. The inherent worth of every human being. May this idea grow and flourish, flower and fruit wheresoever men live. And when we learn to judge men and women, not by their ancestry or birth, not by their creed or color, but by their character, their capabilities, their actions, and their deeds, then shall we be able to live and work and build together the better tomorrow for all mankind.
Thank you, Dr. Gerstein. Today's Eternal Light dramatization, Boaz Makes Up His Mind, was written by Irving Feynman. The music was composed by Morris Mamorsky and conducted by Milton Caton. Cantor Robert H. Siegel sang the liturgical introduction. The role of Boaz was played by Alexander Scobie, and Bryna Rayburn was Ruth. The entire production was under the direction of Frank Papp. Free time to present the Eternal Light is made available by the National Broadcasting Company and its affiliated independent stations. This weekly program is presented under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. If you have any comments or inquiries about today's broadcast, please write to the Eternal Light, 3080 Broadway, New York 27, New York. Because of the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, the festival of Pentecost, this program will not be heard next Sunday. Listen in 2 weeks from today to hear the Eternal Light again. This is NBC, the National Broadcasting Company.
The words we live by. The National Broadcasting Company and its affiliated independent stations present The Words We Live By, the summer series of the Eternal Light program, which comes to you under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. Today we present the 12th in this series of 15 literary dialogues on love, human and divine, featuring two of America's foremost men of letters, Maurice Samuel and Professor Mark Van Doren.
Mark, I'm glad we've got behind us what I called last week the tragic or disastrous loves of the Bible.
Well, they were interesting, Maurice.
Yes, but they were heavy going for me. They're dispiriting. And we're coming now into broad and shining uplands we're coming to what I consider, and perhaps you do too, the loveliest of the love stories in the Bible, although it is the love between two women and constitutes perhaps the most famous, or nearly the most famous personal episode in all biblical literature.
Well, now, wait a minute, Maurice. Yes, it is about the love of two women. It is also, it may be that we shall disagree about this, is it also about the love of a woman and a man, Ruth and Boaz?
Ruth and Boaz. Well...
we'll reserve the question.
Yes, but since you've introduced it in this fashion, I can see we probably will disagree.
All right.
But for the moment, let's go ahead with the Ruth-Naomi relation. You will admit that it is more significant, has taken hold of the world's imagination much more strongly than the relationship between Ruth and Boaz.
Oh, yes, there's no question about that. Anyone asked to remember the book of Ruth remembers the famous moment when Naomi is asking her daughters-in-law to return home, and Ruth refuses. It is merely that later on, I think we shall have something to talk about in connection with the other relation that develops when the two women return to Israel. However, I quite agree.
I called, writing about Ruth and Naomi, I called it an idyll of old age. Now I also think of it as the great example of love in bereavement, how sorrow bound two women together in an everlasting love which has become, one might say, the symbol for all human beings, how a disaster is the prelude to an abiding relationship.
Do we need to remind anyone, Maurice, of what happened before the story begins? Namely, years ago, Naomi had left her country, her people, and gone to the land of the Moabites. And there her two sons, her husband had died, and her two sons had died, and she was left there only with her daughters-in-law. And now it is time to come home, empty, as she says. And the story virtually begins, with a description of the beginning of the journey home.
Yes, there's reason to read and reread those immortal words as one sings a melody. The fact that they're well known is no reason for not repeating them. Those words that Naomi addressed to Ruth, asking her to return, and the words that Ruth uttered, "Entreat me not to leave thee, and to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me." Marvelous words, and I must advert again to the fact that in Hebrew they are incomparably more compact, even than in the admittedly marvelous English.
Can you read them in Hebrew?
Yes,
I'd like to hear them.
Let me read them. Vatomar Ruth, and Ruth said, Al tifge'i bi la'azvech lashuv me'achraich, ki al asher telchi elech, u'ba'asher talini alin, amech ani be'elohayich Elohai, ba'asher tamuti amut, v'sham akaber, ko ya'aseh Adonai li, v'ho yusif, ki amavet yafrid beini u'benech. You notice it's much shorter in the Hebrew. You have two words, for example. Thy people shall be my people consists of two words in Hebrew. One is thy people. That's one word. My people is another word. Thy people, my people. It's a highly contracted form, and it has the immediate effect of piercing you with its intensity.
I don't know, to be sure, about that. It could be that the ultimate effect in English is the same. Thy people and my people They are 4 words only technically, it seems to me.
There was a binding word.
Well, they have the
intermediary word.
Well, that doesn't matter. I was very interested to hear it in Hebrew. I'm reminded of an experience I've often had with persons who ask for advice about how they might learn how to write stories, short stories particularly, but stories of any sort. And I've always advised them not to bother too much with the rules, with books and teachers who would undertake to tell them how to do this. I said, for instance, this thing called characterization is all nonsense. If you remember that one of the most famous persons in all story characterized herself just by one speech she made.
Yes.
And nothing else needs to be said about the woman who could say that.
Yes, what you say strikes me as very cogent.
Now, I'm speaking to you as a novelist, incidentally. Do you agree?
Yes, that can happen. Yet I would ask you this question. Doesn't the book of Ruth and the incident of Ruth and Naomi gather from its background and its surroundings and implications much warmth? Admittedly, that speech alone could be an immortal thing. One could find it as a fragment of a poem and say, some great person spoke that. Nevertheless, the effect of the whole book of Ruth is compounded from a number of circumstances. Let's say the following are some. That this is the story of the coming together of 2 peoples who are often represented as being hostile to each other, the Moabites and the Israelites. It is also a marvelous little episode, peaceful, pastoral, interpolated, episodic, in the midst of the very bloody book of Judges. We are told of the book of Judges in one spot, every man did that which was good in his own eyes. There was no rulership, no continuous rulership, which was what led to the establishment of a monarchy. And in the midst of all this tumult, this rushing back and forth of armies, we see that a quiet life in a little town went on, and a lovely, idyllic incident took place. All of that seems to me contributory to the immense effect of the book of Ruth, without derogating from what you've said.
Well, yes, of course. We're reminded, by the way, that in all times of trouble among any people, the view that the reader of the history of that people takes is that there was turmoil everywhere and all the time. But only common sense can tell us that there must have been times and places where there was no turmoil. And so here there was this little pool of peace. The book of Ruth, I'm glad you reminded me of this, begins by saying, and it came to pass in the days when the judges judged. In other words, this was in the time of Jephthah and Samson and those people who had those terrible and bloody experiences. This, however, as you say, is entirely personal and pastoral and domestic.
It reminds us that life went on. The weaving of the creative side of life, which lies in these things and not in the battles and in the ambitions of generals and princes. It also makes me think of the distorted picture we get very often from satirists and even from prophets. There's a remark in Dill, on Roman history. He said that if what Juvenal said about life in Rome was anywhere near his description, the whole of that society would have collapsed. And if life in Judea was anything like what the prophets described it, sinful nation and sick from head to foot and all the rest of it, that people wouldn't have lasted a year, let alone several centuries. So that here, this is a reminder of the continuity of normal, good, loving people in the midst of very dreadful things and very destructive things.
The story of Ruth is famous, among other things, for its brevity. All the things that you've been saying apply, but they are things that we say after we have been penetrated by the arrow of this tale. You notice how the storyteller says, after this wonderful speech of Ruth to Naomi. This is all that is said about the journey from that point on, back to Israel. And when she saw, that is to say, when Naomi saw that she, that is to say, Ruth, was steadfastly minded to go with her, she left off speaking unto her. So they two went until they came to Bethlehem. There's no discussion, no description of the journey.
A novelist would have taken advantage of the fact that this is a wild country, and it's given you all of the solemn effect of, very skillfully no doubt, the solemn effect of the mountainous areas and the caves and whatnot, and the crossing of the Jordan. And it's all gone here.
And the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun.
And their reflections and meditations and throwbacks.
Yes.
It has made a Hollywood business of it.
Yes, the wonderful thing about it is that nothing like that is done. Once this speech is made, which is the only thing that matters.
In fact, when Hollywood gets hold of a Bible story, all it does is to tell you how good the Bible is if you go back to it.
I read a book not long ago called Ruth. There have been several novels based on this little tale. And as you say, the author was skillful and ingenious at realizing matters that are only implied here. But no amount of realization, it seems to me, sufficed. I preferred to do the realizing myself, as people always have.
You mentioned just a moment ago, Mark, the brevity of the book. There are two short books, both of them very powerful, which have made a great impression on the Western world. The book of Ruth and the book of Jonah. There are shorter books among the prophets, Nahum and Habakkuk and Zephaniah. They're shorter, but they have the effect, they make the effect of being fragments.
I was going to say that.
Whereas these are absolutely perfect. This is a whole world presented in, if I may use the phrase, in a gigantic miniature.
You know, the account of their arrival, for that matter, is marvelous, too, for its brevity, and yet for its fullness. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was astir concerning them. And the women said, Is this Naomi? And she said to them, Call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me back home empty. Why call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned out of the field of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest.
Yes, that's the cut-off, as it were, is perfectly done.
And they came to Bethlehem in the time of the barley harvest.
Yes. You've noticed, Mark, how the book insistently, repeatedly, refers to Ruth as the Moabitess.
Yes.
Always reminding the reader, this woman is a Moabitess, as though the author had it in mind. Now, you don't forget that this is not a story just of two women. It is a story of two women of different peoples, of different groups, which were always, or nearly always, hostile. And look how they built up between them an everlasting story of love. I am quite certain that the author, the editors, had this in mind, and it is, for me, one of the instances of the struggle that went on perpetually in the Jewish people, in the Israelites, between contending impulses. One, the narrow, provincial, and particularist impulse, and the one which was later to triumph and become characteristic of what we call normative Judaism, the universalist one. They were always lapsing into the egotism of being a chosen people in the wrong sense, and striving for, through their prophets and through literature of this kind, for the big vision of being chosen not as a privilege and as a concession to their ego, but being more a choosing people than a chosen people, treading the wide path of the universal approach to mankind. This is what I read into this persistent Ruth the Moabitess.
Yes.
Afterwards, when Boaz presents himself before the little town and says, I'm taking Ruth the Moabitess to wife. It's Ruth the Moabitess. Always the insistence on these two peoples.
Well, now that you speak of Boaz, Maurice, let's argue, if we have to, over the question of whether the Book of Ruth is not equally the love story of Ruth and Boaz and the love story of Ruth and Naomi. No word of love is spoken anywhere in the book.
Yes. I noticed that I checked on it because I wanted to talk about the word love is not mentioned.
Yes, but
of course it needn't be.
No, let me say, neither was it spoken in the case of Naomi and Ruth. Ruth merely says, I will follow you wherever you go, and your God will be my God. I shall dwell where you dwell. And we hear later that Naomi, it is not said that Naomi then understood that Ruth loved her. She merely understood that she was never going to be able to persuade this girl to go back. So, just as there's no word of love spoken between the two women, there's no word of love spoken between the woman and the man, and yet, to me, it is one of the most interesting of love stories.
Well, let's look at the
the story of Ruth and Boaz.
Well, examining this question, let's look at the text. You remember, of course, that there was some sort of managerial play there, that there wasn't a chance meeting between them except as Boaz saw her in the field and was very much moved, told her, I've heard what you did, how you came back with your mother-in-law, and he called her my daughter, from which we gather he was an older man, and perhaps it never occurred to him that there would ever be an intimate relationship between them.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. The fact is that old Naomi had to call upon an ancient custom whereby a young woman could appeal to the leading relative, surviving relative of the family, and on the harvest night, when they all slept in the fields, she came to him. She went down unto the threshing floor, we read, and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thy handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter. Thou hast shown more kindness in the end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou didst not follow the young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not, I will do to thee all that thou sayest. She hadn't said anything, of course. All that thou sayest, or I suppose all that you imply.
Yes.
All the men,
merely by being there.
Yes, for all the men in the gate of my people do know that thou art a virtuous woman. And then he goes on to say, I will do the part of a kinsman to thee. There is affection there.
No, wait a minute. I think there's more than that. Remember, Naomi had put Ruth up to everything that she did. Once the two women returned, Ruth assumes a passive role, as indeed she had assumed a passive role in the beginning. She was utterly in the hands of Naomi. She placed herself in her hands, as she will later place herself in the hands, or if you please, literally at the feet of Boaz. Ruth has the courage to do what Naomi tells her, but it's not clear that she would have had the courage to do anything by herself. Naomi plans the whole thing. Once she hears, after Ruth returns that first day, that she has found herself among the reapers and the gleaners of Boaz, it seems to be clear to Naomi that this is an opportunity. And she gives Ruth explicit directions about that evening on the threshing floor. And I have always been especially interested in what she says when Ruth returns that second time and tells her that Boaz had been kind to her and let her sleep under his robe at his feet and had given her barley to bring home to her mother-in-law. I think that excites Naomi. I don't think the word is too strong. She says, Then said she, that's Naomi, Sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall. For the man will not rest until he hath finished
Very fine.
the thing this day.
Yes.
In other words,
There's
I know what is happening. In other words, Boaz did not need to do all that he did. He could have been merely polite and distant, formal. He could have been courteous to her. I think she interested him a great deal, as she interests you and me, every reader. It's one of the mysteries of love stories, how it is that the reader of them becomes convinced that someone in the love story is lovable. You know how we want persons in love stories to fall in love with one another. What does the storyteller do in order to make us have that desire? Because our desire is just as strong as theirs. So we are for Ruth. We think she's beautiful. She's never called beautiful, by the way.
No.
She's merely called good.
Yes.
Although goodness is one, I suppose, maybe the supreme form of beauty.
Yes, it radiates the features as a rule.
Yes, now here we are given, I think, and I don't think I'm reading too much into this. We're given to understand that Boaz looked at this strange girl who had suddenly come among his people, asked who she was, kept on looking at her, kept saying to himself, everything that she does is good, everything that she does is comely, and he does these favors to her. He sees to it that she is safe among the women rather than among the men who might molest her. And he sees to it, as a matter of fact, he goes to the trouble to say to the women, leave a few things, leave a few pieces of grain about for her to pick up, help her out, in other words, do everything for her. And then he does all this for her. He didn't need to do that. When he was disturbed in the night by her presence, he could have said, I am disturbed. Yes. So you are doing too much.
Perhaps, Mark, it may be that one of the reasons I see this not as primarily a love story, although it is something full of good affection.
By the way, I'm not saying primarily.
Or let me say the reason I play it down, at least in comparison with you, is my vision of it as being they're being involved in a great drama. You know, the Jewish belief that the Messiah, who will be descended from David, will therefore be descended from Ruth and Boaz.
Yes.
So that there is here...
So Jesse and David are descendants of their child.
Yes. So that there is here an intimation of more than human relationships, which gives it a solemnity which, I won't say drowns out, but like a larger strain of music, subdues the individual melody.
Well, now, Maurice...
let me go on for a moment. There's a remarkable passage on which I lean for this, what shall I call it, this historic choreographic effect, you might say.
Yes, I understand.
So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went in unto her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And the woman said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who hath not left thee this day without any kinsman, and let his name be famous in Israel. See, there is already an intimation of a grand theme in which these two loving people, Boaz and Ruth, stand at the center of something greater than themselves.
Well, now, Maurice, I'm not denying the great dimension of this story. And in the whole context of the Bible, that dimension is clear and terribly important. I'm merely saying that the Bible is the great book that we say it is because we don't have merely grandeur here. You see, I can imagine a book written by persons who did not have the genius to blend both grandeur and
intimacy.
Yes. You see, everything that you say is true about the whole tenor of this tale, about the whole meaning of it. Yes, it looks forward and backward, and as we've been saying too, it has as its context the terrible time of the judges, and the peace of it is eloquent because of the contrast. And yet the writers did not fail to make it naturally right. Also, they did not fail to give it that warmth and that particularity and that intimacy, which would save it from being just inflated and empty grandeur. The book, as you and I know very well because we've been saying it for years, this book is both grand and true. It would not seem as true to all the people who read it, I think, if it were nothing but grand gestures and and the drawing of huge, broad outlines.
Yes.
Whenever we enter it, we find some individual doing something which fascinates us.
This blend, it's the choral blend of the individual and the historic, like a melody against a background of woodwind and brass.
That's right.
Again, it appears in the passage preceding the one I've just read to you, when Boaz stands in front of the people at the gate, and he says, "Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I acquired to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren and from among the gate of his place. Ye are witnesses this day." And all the people that were in the gate and the elder said, "We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thy house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel. And do thou worthily in Ephrath, and be famous in Bethlehem, and let thy house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give thee, this young woman." There's a grandeur there that I don't say forbids, but makes one forget the undoubted tenderness, the kindness of the relationship, lifts it into something almost cosmic.
Yes, but when you say lifts it,
yes. The thing is there.
It is there. For instance, when Boaz says to this girl, we're not told what she thinks of him. It is quite possible that up to some point, maybe after the story ends, up to some point, Ruth is nothing except the obedient daughter-in-law. She's doing just what Naomi had told her to do, and she is looking for a husband, to put it all too simply. But Boaz is touched by the fact that she is here, that she has not followed the young men.
Yes, I've often pondered on what the relationship was between them afterwards, whether it had the domestic sweetness of the incident we're going to discuss next week in the story of Tobit.
You have just heard The Words We Live By, the 12th in the 15-week Eternal Light Summer Series. Be with us again next week when Maurice Samuel and Professor Mark Van Doren will resume their discussion of love, human and divine. The Words We Live By is produced under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. This pre-recorded program has been an NBC Public Affairs presentation.
Next, monitor News on the Hour on NBC Radio.
The National Broadcasting Company and its affiliated independent stations present The Eternal Light, a program which comes to you under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. Today's program, The Story of Ruth the Moabitess, is the second in this Eternal Light series of 4 talks by Maurice Samuel, author and lecturer, based on his book, Certain People of the Book. Mr. Samuel.
I came to the opinion many years ago that the Book of Ruth got that name by a copyist's error. It should have been the Book of Naomi. In my opinion, she is the central character, Naomi. I find her more interesting, also more mysterious and attractive than young Ruth, alluring as she is. On a certain day
in the barley harvesting season more than 3,000 years ago, 3 women stood arguing and weeping on the road that led from a village in the land of Moab to the Jordan and the land of Judah. All 3 women were widows. The 2 younger ones were the daughters-in-law of the oldest one. That is to say, the oldest one had lost her husband, and the 2 sons who had been married to the young women. The name of the oldest widow was Naomi, and she was a Jewess, or Israelite. The names of her widowed daughters-in-law were Ruth and Orpah, and they were both Moabitesses. They were not worshippers of the God of Israel. The book of Ruth is one of the shortest in the Bible. It has only 4 chapters, and the first one reads both like an introduction and an epilogue. We are told how Naomi and her husband Elimelech left the land of Judah in a time of famine and sought refuge in the land of Moab. They and their 2 sons, their only children, Machlon and Chilion. And further how Elimelech and Machlon and Chilion died, and how the famine had come to an end in Judah, and how Naomi wanted to return to her native city. And this is what we read about the argument on the road. And Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "Nay, but we will return with thee to thy people." And Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? If I should say, I have hope again to have a husband, and also to bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you shut yourselves off for them and have no husbands? No, my daughters, it grieves me much for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me." And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell, but Ruth clung to her and said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, and to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest I will go, and where thou lodgest I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there I will be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me." These words of Ruth's are among the most famous in secular and sacred literature. We listen to them awed across the interval of 3,000 years, and through the mist of our own tears, we see one returning to her native village, and one going
with Naomi toward the Jordan and the town of Bethlehem, Judah. When they have vanished from our sight, we remain standing and wondering, what was there about Naomi of Bethlehem, the wife of the dead Elimelech and the mother of the dead Machlon and Chilion, that sank so deep into the hearts of the 2 young Moabite women? And why did neither of them say a single word to hold her back in Moab, though they, for their part, were prepared to follow her into an alien land, and only one of them was finally dissuaded? I have just said that for me there is something mysterious about old Naomi.
It is the mystery of goodness and of the power to awaken love in others. There is also mystery in the power to love, but it is inferior to the power of awakening love. I will not go into this question now. I will only ask, what made old Naomi so determined to return to her native place that her daughters-in-law did not even try to hold her back. Was she anxious about her old age and afraid of becoming a dependent? No. She knew that as long as her daughters-in-law lived, she would have a love-filled home even if they remarried. Was she suffering from the childhood regression of the old and unhappy? No, she was not the kind to withdraw selfishly from the living into the memory of the dead. Did she want to die among her own and be buried with them? These two Moabite women had become her own, and in the end she would be buried with her own, her husband and her two sons. What then drew her or drove her so resolutely back to Bethlehem in Judah? Perhaps we have a clue in those words. It grieves me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. They are overwhelmingly despondent words. They seem to indicate despair. She wanted to leave her daughters-in-law because
she believed that an evil destiny was attached to her, and they would share it with her if they went with her. Therefore she told them to turn back. But Ruth would not be deterred. Then we read that when Naomi and Ruth arrived in Bethlehem,
all the city was astir concerning them, and the women said, "Is this Naomi?" And she answered them, "Call me not Naomi," which is the Hebrew for pleasant. "Call me Mara," that is bitter. For the Lord hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me back home empty. In this first chapter, Naomi is almost like a female Job. And now the two widows, a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, have settled in Bethlehem. How were they going to live? We are told that Naomi had a tiny property left her by her husband Elimelech. But there was no income attached to it. Naomi also had relatives by marriage. One of them, Boaz, was rich and important. Another, whose name is discreetly left out, was also a man of some means. I am ashamed to say that neither of these relatives called on Naomi or inquired after her welfare. They must have known of her return. All the city was astir concerning them. The well-to-do relatives ignored them. Now we read, "And Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, Let me go into the field and glean among the ears of corn after him in whose eyes I shall find favor. And Naomi said unto her, Go, my daughter." Notice, Naomi did not tell her to go to Boaz's field or the field of the other well-to-do relative. She simply said, "Go, my daughter." The widow and the stranger were entitled by law to go into any field and to pick up the ears of grain dropped by the reapers or left standing in the corners of a field. That was the social security system in ancient Judea, the earliest known in history. But there is hardly any doubt that Naomi was hoping that Ruth would light by chance on Boaz's field. She was thinking not only of a livelihood for herself and Ruth, she was thinking of a husband for Ruth. And so it turned out. We read that Ruth went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and her hap was to light on the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech, Naomi's dead husband. And Boaz noticed her and asked the foreman who she was, and the foreman answered, "It is a Moabitish damsel who came back with Naomi." Thereupon Boaz approached Ruth, and there was a conversation between them, in the course of which Boaz said, "It has been fully told me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law after the death of thy husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother and the land of thy birth, and art come into a people that thou knowest not heretofore. The Lord recompense thy work, and be thy reward complete from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to take shelter. I must say that this little speech of Boaz's, so pious and so ingratiating, doesn't make a good impression on me. At last it is clear beyond doubt that he knew all about Naomi's and Ruth's return, yet he had never made an effort to look them up. He hadn't even sent them a parcel of food anonymously. One might suspect that he was a trifle scared by the arrival in town of his poor relatives. It wasn't until he had seen Ruth that he began to feel nobly about her. We have to suppose that Ruth was a very beautiful young woman, and the tradition supports that view enthusiastically. And once he had got to know her, his attentions became very marked for a time. We read, Boaz said to her at mealtime, "Come hither and eat of the bread and dip thy morsel in the vinegar." And after the meal, Boaz openly and unembarrassed said to the young men who were harvesting, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and put her not to shame. And also pull out for her from the bundles, and leave it, and let her glean, and do not rebuke her." He was making up to her for his neglect, and we can imagine that it occasioned not a little gossip. Boaz, the wealthy landowner, and the Moabitish girl. By that evening it must have been all over town. The whispering on the rooftops and before the doorsteps, the speculation, and the envy, and perhaps the malice. Boaz, the catch of the town. More than one mother with a marriageable daughter must have had her eyes on him. And on that same evening, when Ruth came home to Naomi, carrying a whole ephah of barley, which is over a bushel, Naomi was astonished. It was obvious that Ruth couldn't have gathered more than a bushel just by gleaning for one day. Someone must have thrown down stuff especially for her. "Where hast thou gleaned today? Blessed be he that took knowledge of thee." And Ruth answered, "The name of the man was Boaz." Boaz. The name meant nothing to Ruth. She had no idea that he was of her husband's family. She saw no special significance in it, except that the man had been interested and kind. But to old Naomi it was like the finger of God. To her it was not a coincidence, but a sign from heaven that the evil destiny which had pursued her till then was about to drop away, and she was to know happiness. And it is as well to note that the happiness that Naomi dreamed of was to spring from the happiness of Ruth. Well then, Naomi had received a sign. There was an immediate change in her outlook. When her wealthy kinsmen had ignored her, she had said nothing about them to Ruth, although she must have said to herself, "So this is how matters stand." But when Ruth came home with the bushel of barley and the story of Boaz's attentiveness, she must have said to herself, "So this is how matters stand." But all she said to Ruth was, "The man is a close relative of ours. And it is good, my daughter, that thou go out with his maidens, and that thou be not met in another field." Old Naomi's mind was at work. A sign from heaven didn't mean to her that everything was going to happen according to her highest wishes, and there was nothing for her to do. She had to cooperate. She had to act. But how? When? We are going to discover that Naomi had an exquisite sense of timing. An ordinary woman might have acted prematurely or might not have acted at all. Not so with Naomi. She waited for the right moment. The weeks went by, and the reapers reaped, and the gleaners gleaned, and every evening Ruth brought home her gleanings, and not a word more from or about Boaz. Was he sorry he had been so precipitate, he, the mature man? Was he afraid that young Ruth would not take him? We don't know, because we aren't told. There had been an exciting start, big with promise, and no follow-up. He had shown such friendliness on the first day, and now silence. And Naomi must have said again, so this is how matters stand. In order not to be too hard on Boaz, we must recall that there were certain laws in ancient Judea which affected the situation. If a woman became a widow, the brother of her dead husband was morally bound to marry her. If he refused to do that, he had to submit to a humiliating ceremony. He had to appear in public. The woman took off one of his shoes and spat on the ground in contempt. Before this ceremony, called chalitza, had been performed, the woman wasn't free to marry again. Now it so happened that Naomi's other relative, who would also be Ruth's relative, was nearer in kinship to her than Boaz. It is not stated that he was a brother of Ruth's dead husband. That would have made him a son of Naomi's. But it seems that he was of sufficiently close kin to come under the application of the chalitza law. Boaz couldn't marry Ruth until this unnamed relative had released her. And it is possible that Boaz hesitated so long because he was not at all sure that the other relative would release Ruth. But the harvest days were ending. After them, Boaz would hardly ever see Ruth, if at all. True, he wasn't by any means Ruth's last chance, but in Naomi's judgment after the sign, this was the marriage for Ruth. We who live so long after the event can see that Ruth and Boaz were meant for each other. But those who lived through the event hadn't our advantage. The time had come for old Naomi to act. We read, "And Naomi said unto Ruth, Behold, Boaz will be winnowing barley tonight on the threshing floor. Wash thyself, therefore, and anoint thyself, and put thy best raiment on thee, and get thee down to the threshing floor. But do not make thyself known to Boaz until he shall have finished eating and drinking. Then, when he lieth down, mark the place, and go to him, and uncover his feet, and lie down there, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do." We know so little about the customs of those days that we can't determine how much boldness there was in Naomi's counsel and how much convention. We can rule out at once any suggestion of impropriety that would be grossly out of keeping with our characters and with the story. What we do know is that Ruth followed Naomi's instructions to the letter. And in the middle of the night, Boaz awoke, and a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, "Who art thou?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, thy handmaid. Spread thy skirt therefore over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman." To which Boaz replied, "Blessed art thou of the Lord, my daughter, but thou hast shown more kindness in the end than at the beginning, for thou didst not follow the young men, rich or poor. And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do all that thou sayest, for all the men in the gate of my people know that thou art a virtuous woman." This man, Boaz, really had an unfortunate way of expressing himself. When he first met Ruth, he said, "It hath been fully told me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law, and the Lord recompense thy work. And now he tells her, for all the men in the gate of my people know that thou art a virtuous woman. It looks as though he had been waiting for public approval before he decided to act. Perhaps I am doing him an injustice. What looks like offensive caution may only have been an elderly man's awkwardness. The important thing is that he promised to act the next day, and he did. We read, Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat him down there, and the near kinsman came by, and Boaz said to him, Oh, such a one, turn aside, sit down here. Such a one. Not a very courteous way of addressing a man. But the man wasn't the kind to inspire respect, as we shall see in a moment. We read, And Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city, and said, Sit ye down here. And he said to the kinsman, Naomi, that is come back out of the field of Moab, selleth the parcel of land, which was our brother Elimelech's. And I thought to disclose it unto thee, saying, Buy it in the presence of them that sit here. If thou wilt redeem it, redeem it. But if thou wilt not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know. For there is none to redeem it beside thee, and I am after thee. Then such a one, or as we would say nowadays, what's his name, answered, I will redeem it. He was willing to buy the parcel of land so that it should remain in the family. But he'd forgotten something. And Boaz reminded him, saying, On the day when you buy that parcel of land from Naomi, you are also buying it from Ruth, the Moabitess. And to buy it you must marry her, so that she may have children to commemorate her dead husband. Thereupon such a one immediately backed down. He said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar my own inheritance. What did he mean? Just a moment ago, he was ready to acquire the piece of land, and now that he heard he could only do so by marrying Ruth, he found it didn't pay. The legends tell us that such a one, they give him the name of Tob, I don't know why, didn't know the law. He supposed that Ruth, being a Moabitish woman, wouldn't be protected by that law. And the moment he found out that this law, like the law of gleaning, applied to strangers just as much as to Israelites, he changed his mind. He cuts a rather sorry figure. He wanted the land, and what happened to Ruth afterwards was none of his business. It was of this kind of man that in later years the prophet would say, Woe to those that join house to house, that lay field to field. Let's dismiss him from the story. He introduces a jarring note. For now the story rises to a grand choral climax. We read, And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, Ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Machlon and Chilion's, from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Machlon, have I acquired to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren, and from the gate of his place. Ye are the witnesses this day. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is to come into thy house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephrat, and be famous in Bethlehem. Boaz has therefore taken it upon himself to be the surrogate of the dead man, and to be known forever, therefore, as the husband of Ruth the Moabitess. He was to be famous, but only as the husband of Ruth. We who read so much today about husbands who won't accept a secondary role to a great or gifted woman must acknowledge that there was a fine modesty in Boaz. He knew himself to be the less important person and was willing to accept that role. And at this point we feel that the idyll of old times is ended. Ruth the Moabitess has found a fine husband. Naomi will be taken care of for the rest of her days. But just at this point, when it is ending, the story takes the strangest turn imaginable in the last few sentences. We read, "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And the women said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord who hath left thee not without a kinsman, and let his name be famous in Israel, and he shall be unto thee a restorer of life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, who is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. And Naomi took the child, and laid it in her bosom, saying, There is a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David." How extraordinary! Is not this the book of Ruth? And does it not celebrate primarily Ruth's sweetness and devotion? Naomi certainly plays an important part, but how can the book end so strangely, with Naomi at the center of the epilogue, and Ruth somewhere at the side? So much so that the women say, "There is a son born to Naomi," as though the great-great-grandmother of David were Naomi and not Ruth. We get the feeling that the recorder of the story originally thought of Ruth, the more obviously dramatic of the 2 women, as the heroine, and that is how he tried to write it. And certainly Ruth is one of the loveliest and most moving characters known to us. But as he went along, Naomi, with whom the story opens, drew him more and more,
even as she had drawn her daughters-in-law, and he was not quite aware of it, and by the time he ended, he had forgotten what he started out to say. He was, in fact, a greater artist than he intended to be. We are told that the story of Ruth and Naomi was written as a protest against Jewish chauvinism. Someone recalled it or thought it up at a much later period in the days of Ezra the scribe, when he was compelling the Jews of his time to divorce their foreign and idolatrous wives. I don't accept this view, but I honor it and recognize the points in its favor. It is pleasant to observe how often the text insists on Ruth the Moabitess. There is no glossing over of her origins. And if with all this in its favor I reject the theory of a propaganda piece, it is because I do not believe that such great writing can be born of a public relations assignment. It was a spontaneous recording by a man who was a greater artist than he knew.
Heard the second in this Eternal Light series of 4 talks by Maurice Samuel, author and lecturer, based on his book, Certain People of the Book, published by Alfred A. Knopf, Incorporated. Be with us again next week for the 3rd program in this Eternal Light series, The Story of Isaac and Rebekah. The Eternal Light is produced under the auspices of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. This pre-recorded recorded program has been an NBC Public Affairs presentation.
This is the NBC Radio Network.